So our next step is to actually make the other 4 practice tests because I already made the first practice test. So that should be 5 videos, right? Split them up into 5 different videos and it should be good. I can create more. I should be creating more, but 5 is fine for right now. We'll just make a couple more templates so we can just add the questions and import them in. We should be fine. 4,000 different CySA Plus practice questions. So if I did 100 each video, it would be 40 videos. That would be 4,000 practice questions. But the max on the test is 85. I just rounded it up to 100 because it's a more even number than 85. So right now I'm only going to do 1 practice test for this video. This video is only going to be one of the 100 question tests. The other test will be coming later. I'm planning on releasing like 40 of them. 40, 100, that's 4,000 questions, right? So let's get into the practice test. So I come up here and you see all the, but I haven't made the other ones. The only one I've made is the set number 1. And it randomizes whenever you click on it. Let's answer this one. In critical infrastructure with SCADA systems, which scanning method mitigates risk from performance impacts while adhering to ISO 27000? And why is the reverse engineering preferred over fuzzing for custom firmware analysis? Active agentless for broad coverage, passive static for non-disruptive baseline, dynamic credentialed for exploit testing, or internal dynamic with segmentation. So it's asking which scanning method mitigates risk for performance impacts. And I have no idea what the ISO 27000, so that really doesn't help. And then it asks another question, why is reverse engineering preferred over fuzzing for custom firmware analysis? That's asking about fuzzing. The other top thing really doesn't matter. It's just why is reverse engineering preferred over fuzzing for custom firmware analysis? Internal dynamic with segmentation. Internal dynamic. Reverse engineering preferred over fuzzing. Fuzzing is like scanning the website for vulnerabilities, right? So active agentless for broad coverage. That's talking about an agentless thing where it doesn't use software in the SCADA system. Passive static for non-disruptive baseline. Dynamic credentialed for exploit testing, or this one's tricky, right? But key thing here, why is reverse engineering preferred over fuzzing? Firmware analysis. Has to do with SCADA systems. Dynamic credentialed for exploit testing. Passive static for non-disruptive baseline. Active agents for broad coverage. This question's tricky even for me, but, it wouldn't be, I'm not going to say what it's going to be or what, but I'm just going to think, and I'm just going to pick an answer. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Dynamic credentialed for exploit testing, internal dynamic segmentation. Reverse engineering would be if they were doing like static testing. But also, I'd like to say that it's non-disruptive if you're doing it in an offline environment, right? So for me, it's either between internal dynamic with segmentation or passive static for non-disruptive baseline. But I'm really wanting to answer with this question. Static code analysis, right? But it says nothing about static code analysis in here. It just says reverse engineering could be static. That's one of the ways that you could test it, right? Internal, which scanning method mitigates risk. Performance impacts. They're talking about, like a business, if they're running a website, Black Friday, stuff like that. I don't know, that's just how my brain thinks about it, but that's when their performance is going to get hit really, really heavily. So scanning actually does put performance impacts. It does slow down the website or the network, whatever you're going to call it. So we want a non-disruptive baseline. It's going to be passive static because internal dynamic with segmentation has nothing to do with if it causes performance impacts. That's at least what I think. So let's answer passive static for non-disruptive baseline. We got it. So I'm just trying to show you how I'm thinking through these questions, talking to you about them. And OT, what's OT? What's OT? I'm thinking operational technology systems, but OT systems doesn't really matter, but it does help to know what they are. I have no idea what OT stands for. But operational technology security, it says it up there. See right here? Okay, at least we know that now. In OT systems, availability impact is high. How does exploitability analysis prioritize 0 days on low asset value but reoccurring vulnerabilities? Does it Deprioritize for true negatives. Escalate despite user interaction. Ignore context awareness. Rank based on integrity only. Operational technology available. The impact is going to be high. So they're trying to prioritize 0 days on the low asset value but recurring. Deprioritize for true negatives. Escalate despite user interaction. Ignore context awareness, or rank based on integrity only. A 0 day is really bad for the scenario that they're describing because they're saying it's operational technology and the impact is high. So if there was a 0 day, it would really mess up because it already says the impact is high. If this system or whatever went down, the impact would be high is what they're saying. So I would think escalate it because it says the impact is high. So I would just escalate it, right? I have no idea if this is going to be right. But from the other answers, it looks good as an answer, right? We got it right. During incident response, what technique ensures preservation of volatile data, like random access memory, before powering down? Legal hold, data and log analysis, validating data integrity, chain of custody. Well, for this one, it's saying preservation. So in preservation, you want to make sure the data, I don't want to give it away, but you want to make sure the data is like all there, right? So for me, this one right here, because validating data integrity, you want to validate that everything's there, right? They do the RAM capture where they capture whatever's in memory, right? Before it's powered down, because random access memory, whatever's stored in there is temporary, right? It gets deleted whenever you power it down, right? Or whatever happens to it. Validating data integrity is my answer choice. Yeah, I guess I got that one wrong because during incident response, what technique ensures preservation of legal hold? Because they have a way to make sure the data stays secure, especially on a legal hold, right? So legal hold, because for that one I would have probably said like chain of custody, because chain of custody is like forensics, like whenever you're trying to keep data, preservation, stuff like that, it would be chain of custody, I believe. Who has the data and how it gets transported, stuff like that. Especially for like a legal hold and stuff, where they're wanting that data, right? Which vulnerability scanning method is most appropriate in a highly sensitive SCADA environment where regulatory requirements under ISO 27000 prohibit any potential disruption to operations and the goal is initial asset discovery without active probing? Credentialed active scanning, agent-based dynamic analysis, passive scanning with device fingerprinting, fuzzing for reverse engineering. Vulnerability scanning method. So all of the answer choices are a vulnerability scanning method. So we're looking at probing, right? Probing, a lot of the times especially when you don't want any disruption. A credentialed active scan would most likely it would cause a disruption, right? Network slowdown or something where so much stuff is being sent to it. Like a DDoS attack. A DDoS attack, so much stuff is sent to it that you can't even connect to the internet, right? Or the internet's down, right? Where you can't, like the internet, you know what I'm saying? Agent-based dynamic analysis, passive scanning. For me, it's going to be passive scanning with device fingerprinting because they're wanting the most non-disruptive method that meets the regulatory requirement, so it would be passive scanning with device fingerprinting. Why are compliance reports crucial in vulnerability management communication? To identify stakeholders, to ensure adherence to regulatory standards, to measure key performance indicators, to plan actions. Why are they crucial? Well, this one's a no-brainer because it sticks out like a sore thumb, right? To ensure adherence to regulatory standards, right? Because while it wants to do some of these, right, it helps when processes like that are in place, it helps do it. But the most correct answer, because on CompTIA exams, what I can tell you is, what I can legally tell you is that a lot of the questions are going to seem right, and a lot of them could be correct in different scenarios, but there's only one actually correct answer, right? And that would be our actually correct answer. Why is root cause analysis emphasized in incident response communication? To escalate incidents to identify lessons learned, to declare incidents, or to report to media. This one's kind of like in between because I'm like, identify lessons learned, that's the one that I want to click. But to escalate incidents, it's either between, but also they can declare them with it too. But I would say identify lessons learned because you're going to learn that, oh, this is the reason it happened. Next time we're not going to do it that way. So that's why I'm thinking identify lessons learned. What key performance indicator in vulnerability management tracks patterns over time? Vulnerability, for this I would say key performance indicator. Trends would be tracked, wouldn't they? Because critical vulnerabilities can be tracked too, but trends are, there's always going to be a new cybersecurity trend, right? So I'm going to say trends because it's different patterns over time you'll see. But critical vulnerabilities you'll see over and over the same vulnerability. So it's either between trends and critical vulnerabilities because OWASP Top 10 is for web vulnerabilities. It's not a specific key performance indicator or the SLO. Right now my brain's having trouble knowing what SLO means, but service level something. But it's either between trends and critical vulnerabilities. What KPI and vulnerability management tracks patterns over time? Let's just say trends because that's the one that I really want to click. Just to see if it's right. We got it. Which concept in security operations involves automating repetitive tasks to minimize human engagement? Single pane of glass, SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response, API, application programming interface, or team coordination? Concept, to minimize human engagement. To minimize human engagement. Security orchestration, automation, and response. Single pane of glass is like how everything's dashboard together and everything's connected, right? That's called the single pane of glass. But I'm between security orchestration and team coordination, but it said minimize human engagement, so I'm like, a team maximizes that human engagement. So it has to be SOAR. But then you're also like API. I'm overthinking it, but which concept in security operations involve automating repetitive tasks to minimize human engagement? This one's like a trick question, right? Because an API could be used for automation, right? But security orchestration, automation, response, that has automation in the name. So I'm like, why can't it be that? Because it actually says automation right in the thing. So I'm going to go with security orchestration, automation, response. Because automation, right? Security orchestration, automation, and response. Let's click it. We got it right. When CVSS shows high scope, CVSS is the common vulnerability system, shows high scope changes for integrity impacts. How does asset value override base scores and prioritizing true positives on business critical connected systems? Deprioritize isolated what? Escalate for weaponization, ignore false negatives, rank medium for attack vectors. And prioritizing true positives, how does the asset value override base scores? I'm going to just say that like CVSS, they inflate and deflate their scores, right? Based on how they want the vulnerability perceived. So I have no idea. Well, let me just think about it. Ignore false negatives, right? How does asset value override base scores and prioritizing? Rank medium for attack vectors. When CVSS shows high scope changes for intake, how does asset value override base scores? Deprioritize isolated. So they're saying because the system's isolated that they're not going to prioritize it. I mean, they're talking about positive, true positive. So I'm going to say ignores false negatives. Yeah. Well, I was trying to think on that, but yeah, that one got me. How does asset value override base scores and prioritizing true positives on business critical connected systems? So what are they saying? They're saying that if a CVSS score that's actually critical, they give low priority. Is that what they're saying? Because if it had low priority and it was a critical vulnerability, they could weaponize that vulnerability. So I guess that's what they were trying to convey. But in detecting malicious activity, what is the primary purpose of identifying indicator of compromise during the analysis phase? Isolation, evidence acquisition, remediation, scope determination. What is the primary purpose of identifying IOCs? I would say like evidence, because you're trying to figure out how indicator of compromise is like, I could see impossible travel as a indicator of compromise. So that is some evidence that impossible travel is evidence that someone else has logged into your account from another country or another state, right? And detecting malicious activity. So I'm going to say you're acquiring evidence, because if you didn't know that someone like logged into your account from a different country, you wouldn't have that evidence that someone did. But also it's scope, because I'd think it would be scope too. But what is the primary of identifying analysis? You're trying to get evidence, I would say. So given 0-day exploits, what key performance indicator focuses on urgent threats? We already know what this one is. It's 0 days, because 0 days are really, really critical. Really, really bad stuff that hasn't been found yet. So we can't make signatures and stuff on it, right? So that we can detect these different attacks, right? Which preparation for activity simulates incident through discussion without actual execution? Training, playbooks, tabletop, BCDR. That's business continuity and disaster recovery. With preparation, activity simulates incidents through discussion without actual execution. Tabletop, because I see that that's a lot of times what they use. They call them tabletop exercises, but it also aids in like being ready for that disaster to come, right? That attack, that cyber attack to come. Which operating system concepts involves modifying default settings to reduce vulnerabilities? I would say it's not the Windows registry. It would be hardening, because hardening heavily modifies the system so that the settings are all secure and stuff. For web application vulnerabilities and incident response, which guide provides testing techniques like injection and cross-site scripting, which is XSS? So MITRE ATT&CK, OSS, TM, OWASP testing guide, or cyber kill chain. OWASP is like what I think when I think like website vulnerability, stuff like that. Just think about website vulnerabilities whenever you think OWASP. So I want to say OWASP. What is key aspect of streamlining operations and security? Standardized processes, automation and orchestration, team coordination to manage automation, identification of tasks suitable for automation. What is the key aspect of streamlining operations and security? Well, that would be standardized processes. Wouldn't it? No, it wouldn't. Streamlining, the only way to streamline is to automate, right? So I was thinking standardized, but you can't really mess up. But I'm learning from these questions, right? Automation and orchestration. Automation and orchestration, because, yeah, that makes a lot more sense than the one that I picked. But, yeah. And preparing for incidents, what documents outlining roles, responsibilities, and procedures? Playbooks, incident response plan, tools, or tabletop? In preparing for incidents, it could be an incident response plan, but that's not preparing anybody. That's just the plan, right? If you don't practice the plan, then you're not going to be ready. You're not going to be prepared. So, what document? But it's asking for what document, so we would answer with incident response plan. Given a network intrusion scenario, what step follows detection limits to limit spread, such as disconnecting affected segments, remediation, isolation, re-imaging, scope? Given a network intrusion scenario, what step follows detection to limit spread, such as disconnecting affected segments, detection limit, to limit the spread? Isolation would limit the spread, because I usually would isolate the device, because then it can't spread. Like if it's a network worms can spread through the network and give different computers like viruses and stuff, because it's a network vulnerability that just goes from computer to computer. That's what a worm is, right? Let's answer with that. Which identity and access management concept allows users to access multiple systems with one set of credentials? I would say single sign-on, but privileged access management helps orchestrate that, doesn't it? But let's just say SSO, because that's the first one that I thought. For API-heavy apps with cross-site request forgery, root cause, or what? Remote code execution, and crypto failures, which control mitigates LFI and RFI, and multi-user? What is LFI and RFI? security misconfigurations, privilege escalation with role-based access control, end-of-life updates, insecure design reviews for API-heavy apps, and crypto failures. What is LFI? Like these, but I can guess the question. Security misconfigurations, privilege escalation, role-based access control, end-of-life updates, or insecure design reviews. So it's talking about end-of-life or security misconfigurations. Which control mitigates? Security misconfigurations don't mitigate anything. End-of-life updates just tells the person. Insecure design reviews don't help. So I would say privilege escalation, RBAC. Which control mitigate end-of-life updates? End of life, or I have no idea what RFI means. Yeah, I'm gonna guess because I have no idea. Wait, how was it that privilege escalation? So they're saying role-based access control prevents privilege escalation in a sense, right? And incident response reporting, which component provides a high-level overview for executives? Timeline, executive summary, impact, recommendations. And incident response reporting, timeline. We already answered them, but in incident response reporting, which component provides a high level, or wanting a high level overview? A high level overview. Would that be the summary, the executive summary? Because they're talking about executives already, so it's literally a no-brainer to click on executive summary. A high level overview. It's just an overview. A summary is an overview. So, which risk management principle is applied when using compensating controls for unpatchable legacy systems due to degrading functionality? Accept the risk, transfer the risk, avoid the risk, or mitigate the risk. Mitigate it? Would it be mitigated? Unpatchable it due to degrading functionality. That would probably be, I don't know if you'd accept it because I don't think you would transfer it with like a insurance or something like that. Avoid, why would you avoid it? Mitigate it? I would just say you mitigate it. Because all you'd have to do is like, if it works offline, just unplug it from the internet. So that would be a way to mitigate it. What network-related indicator might indicate a reconnaissance attack? Beaconing, scan sweeps, data exfiltration, or unauthorized privileges? Scan sweeps, if someone found out that you were doing scans, it would indicate that you were doing a reconnaissance attack. Beaconing is just, beaconing also is there, but that's like C2 servers beaconing back to the control server. That has nothing to do with reconnaissance. You're already in their system, command and control, with beacon, the victim's computer beaconing back to you, right? So the best answer for this, for me, it would be scan sweeps. For unremovable threats, which control is used in the recovery phase to mitigate risk temporarily? I'd say impact or scope impact. Compensating controls definitely would temporarily help. For mobile apps with CSRF and cryptographic failures exacerbated by misconfigurations, which control addresses privileges escalation in cloud native? Which control address privilege escalation in cloud native? Natively on the cloud? Well, I would say SDLC does play a part in it. Input validation would help, but that's more for SQL or XSS cross-site scripting attacks, right? But CSRF also, input, you'd have to input something for a CSRF attack too. Cross-site request forgery. Well, they're doing cryptographic failures. They better be redesigning their software, because if that's an app with millions of people on it, if that is a mobile app with millions of people on it, that isn't good, right? So I'd say secure development lifecycle redesign. During penetration testing with methodology, emphasizes open source tools and systematic security testing. Cyber kill chain, OSSTM, diamond model, or OWASP testing guide. During penetration testing, which methodology emphasizes open source? Well, the OSS whatever, open source something. I have no idea what that means. OSSTTM or something. When implementing vulnerability scanning in an OT network with legacy ICS industrial control system devices, which special consideration is critical to avoid degrading functionality, and how does it influence the choice between static and dynamic analysis? Sensitivity levels favoring dynamic for runtime testing, regulatory requirements favoring static to prevent outages, Operations favoring active fuzzing for exploit simulation. Performance favoring agent-based reverse engineering. Now this one's tricky because the answer choices are a little bit longer, but once you get like the keywords, you'll answer it pretty good. But which special consideration is critical? Degrading functionality. Choice between static and dynamic. They're talking about the choices between static and dynamic. Why would you choose one over the other? So really they're just looking, why would you choose one over the other? And they're looking for the correct one. So I mean, regulatory requirements could be a thing, so that's probably one of the answers that we could pick from, right? That I would probably pick. Sensitivity levels favoring dynamic for runtime testing. Well, of course you're going to be running it. Dynamic means you're running it. Static means you're not running it. Operations favoring active fuzzing for exploit simulation. Well, they're talking about an OT network, operation technology network, legacy ICS devices, regulatory. Well, they never say that they want to prevent outages in the question, right? So that's not going to be the answer. But I think the first one's right because sensitivity levels favoring dynamic for runtime testing. Because if outages are, you don't really care because it's ICS devices. It's a legacy device. If it gets turned off, not really anybody's going to be affected with an ICS device, depending on how that ICS device is used. In some scenarios, it could be really, really bad if a older device stopped working, right? But special is critical to avoid degrading functionality. Would static degrade the functionality? Would it take it offline? Would regulatory requirement favoring static? Performance favoring agent-based reverse engineering. Performance favoring agent-based reverse engineering. Software-based OT network with special. I would say it's either one or two, but we're going to go with two just because they said they don't want to degrade the functionality, so we have to go with the one that says prevent outages. I was overthinking that question, but in a hybrid cloud infrastructure compliant with PCI DSS, where segmentation isolates cardholder data, which scanning approach balances performance considerations with the need for deep configuration insights on virtualized instances during scheduled maintenance windows? Non-credentialed external scanning, agentless static analysis, credentialed internal scanning, or active map scans without segmentation. PCI DSS, cardholder data, considerations with the need for deep configuration insights, virtualized instances, scheduled maintenance windows. Active map scans without segmentation, non-credentialed external scanning. Deep configuration insights. That really, really helps us because it shows us what they're wanting. They want deep configuration insights. So, which one of these scanning or whatever it is, different types of analysis, what one of those would help you with deep configuration insights? Non-credentialed, agentless static, credentialed internal scanning, active map scans without segmentation. Mapping scans. What is a map scan? Active map scans without segmentation. Non-credentialed external scanning. Well, with a non-credential scan, you're not going to be getting very much insight. You're just going to get the base level, right? Versus a credentialed, you're going to be getting all of that information. So we're going to say credentialed internal scanning. What integration method uses code to connect different security tools programmatically? Now this one's a no-brainer because while the other ones could probably help, I don't think data enrichment would help. Moreover, application programming interface. Which application-related indicator could suggest a compromise in user authentication? Unexpected output, introduction of new accounts, bandwidth consumption, file system changes, or anomalies. Application-related indicator could suggest a compromise in user authentication. So we're talking about an indicator of compromise. Unexpected output, introduction of new accounts. All of those could be an indicator of compromise. They're saying what one suggests a compromise in user authentication. I would say introduction of new accounts, but also file system changes or anomalies could be it. But let's get this one right. So introduction of new accounts doesn't necessarily say, because that's not always an indicator of compromise. People are always onboarding and offboarding people. They're making accounts for people. So that isn't really that big of an indicator of compromise. Bandwidth consumption. They're not talking about anything with the network. They're talking about application related that deals with user authentication. So I'm going to say file system changes or anomalies. Unexpected output, not really for this one. So, but I mean, definitely new accounts. But even then, like I said, they're gonna make every question look right on the actual test, right? Which tool is used for endpoint detection and response? EDR and security operations. Wireshark, definitely not, because Wireshark, security information and event management, endpoint security tool, example as per projectives, CompTIA Sandbox. But for me, wait, why did it say as per objectives? Then I'll just say it's the endpoint security tool as per objectives. Which tool is used for endpoint and response? They literally just said, like, this question is probably the easiest question ever. In disaster recovery business continuity scenarios, why is transferring risk viable for unpatchable systems? Incorporating corrective controls and rollback. Accept via exceptions. Mitigate with compensating. Avoid by isolation or transfer via insurance. In DRBC scenarios, why is transferring risk viable for unpatchable systems? Incorporating corrective controls and rollback. Now that one was, transferring risk. How are you going to transfer via insurance? Because that's called risk transference wherever you buy insurance. When you buy car insurance or something like that, that's if you get in a car wreck. That's the risk. The risk is that you're going to get in a car wreck, right? I don't want anyone to get in a car wreck though, but that's just an example. Transfer via insurance. Which framework focuses on adversary tactics, techniques, and procedures to model attacks and incident response? Cyber kill chain, diamond model, MITRE ATT&CK, or the OSS thing? Open source something. Which framework focuses on adversary tactics, techniques? Modeling attacks. Diamond model, I'm like, maybe, but MITRE ATT&CK does a lot of like, hey, this is the point of attack right here. This is the point of attack where he escalated up to this privilege. But diamond model really talks about the adversary and different like characteristics of that. MITRE ATT&CK, I think. I'm going to be in between diamond model and MITRE ATT&CK for this question because it's either one of them. Because it's not OSS, it's not cyber kill chain. Let's go with, I know I'm going crazy, but I want to click MITRE ATT&CK, but my brain's telling me click diamond model because it says model. So every time I've seen something model, I'm like, bro, my brain lied to me. My brain's like, I was going to click MITRE ATT&CK, but then I second guessed myself. What other indicator of malicious activity involves tricking users into revealing sensitive information? Obfuscated links, abnormal OS operating system behavior, social engineering attacks, or registry changes or anomalies? What other indicator of malicious activity involves tricking users into revealing sensitive information? Well, that's going to be social engineering, right? In integrating business continuity disaster recovery with incident preparation, what ensures minimal downtime? Tools, training, business continuity, disaster recovery, tabletop. If you're good at, that's just repeating. In integrating BC, what ensures minimal downtime? Tools, training, or tabletop? Well, if you practice, you're going to be prepared. So let's just say tabletop because tabletop trains you to be prepared. But I know this question is going to be like stupid and just say the other one's right. How is this one right? How is that one right? What ensures minimal downtime? I guess tabletop could, I guess all 1, 2, 3 of these could be classified in business continuity and disaster recovery. Tabletop is like business continuity, and it's also disaster recovery at the same time. Because what if a vulnerability comes in? That might be a little disaster because it might have a big impact. Which application-related indicator could point to a denial of service attack? Introduction of new accounts, service interruption, unexpected output, anomalous activity, denial of service. I'd say service interruption because denial of service, you can't connect to the internet because the internet's down because you're using way too much of the internet, right? Sending way too many packets to the internet. And a malware outbreak, what recovery technique involves wiping and restoring from backups? Compensating controls, remediation, re-imaging, or isolation. Malware outbreak. For me, I would say isolation, but even then it's remediation as well, because you're going to remediate it. It's remediation because they're talking about what recovery technique involves wiping. But re-imaging is restoring from backups. So I'm going to say they're re-imaging from a backup. Which vulnerability scanning concept is essential for handling ephemeral devices or serverless architecture? Handling ephemeral serverless architectures in cloud environments, considering scheduling and sensitivity levels to comply with PCI DSS. Internal active scanning, agent-based credentialed scanning, external non-credentialed dynamic analysis, or agentless passive scanning with regulatory exceptions. We don't have any exceptions, do we? Because we have PCI DSS. There's no exception to it, right? So I'd say that one's wrong. External non-credentialed dynamic analysis, agent-based or credentialed scanning, internal active scanning. Ephemeral means single, so it's only like single sign-on, right? Something like that. Internal active scanning. Ephemeral serverless architectures in cloud environments considering scheduling and sensitivity levels. So it has something to do with PCI DSS. So I would say that they wouldn't want to like disrupt their network. So it's going to have to be external non-credentialed. Would it be? They wouldn't do internal, would they? Because internal could disrupt the network, especially when they're doing like payment card industry, whatever. I would say it has to be this one because agentless passive scanning are not going to disrupt the network by passively scanning the network. If they're doing like a credentialed scan, they definitely would disrupt the network. Okay, I'm back now. So we got the answer right. In file analysis, what technique is used to compute a unique digital fingerprint? Pattern recognition, hashing, header analysis, or impossible travel? I already know impossible travel isn't right. I would say hashing because they're talking about files specifically. They're talking about like fingerprinting or something else like digital fingerprints or something like that. But they're talking about files, hash files, stuff like that. It's a hash value that you can verify the integrity of it. And there's different hashing algorithms, stuff like that. Which process improvement concept involving identifying tasks that are repeatable and do not require human interaction? Automation or orchestration, standardized processes, technology and tool integration, or single pane of glass? Which process improvement concept involves identifying tasks that are repeatable and do not require human interaction? Automation makes it where like automation and orchestration makes it where a lot of human interaction. I would say automation, the automation one. Well, I was just thinking automation, it helps remove a lot of the human interaction, but it was actually standardized processing because with the other stuff, this is unrelated to cybersecurity, it's something else. But 5S, that's standardizing processing, right? You have the 5 S's, like Toyota uses it, but standardizing processing would be the right one. And I just think 5S helps standardize processes. I was linking it to that. In post-incident activity, what process identifies the underlying cause of a breach? Lessons learned, forensic analysis, root cause analysis, or training. In post-incident activity, so these are processes underlying cause of the breach. So for this one, we want to find root cause because we're trying to find a cause. It literally says cause and cause up here, so I'm like, yeah, that's going to be the right answer because it says cause and then it says cause. Because root cause, you're trying to find the root of the problem. And analyzing logs for unusual access patterns, which phase of incident response is primarily involved in analyzing logs for unusual access patterns? Containment, detection and analysis, recovery, or eradication? They're trying to, and analyzing logs for which phase of incident response is primarily involved? Detection and analysis, because you're just in like the initial phases, right? The initial phases are detection and analysis, right? Which scripting language is mentioned for handling structured data like configurations? And then it gives us the structured data, I think JSON. All the others are just like, also regular expressions, like they help you sort. It's called like regex, I believe, REGEX. That helps you sort through large amounts of data. So for this one, I would say regular expressions. It's not going to be JSON, PowerShell, or shell script. The reason is because regex helps you handle structured data, right? Helps you structure the data in a sense, get what you actually want out of the data so it can take out key parts, it can look through things. Regex is very, very powerful. Regular expressions are very, very powerful. They call it regex, R-E-G-E-X. They call it that. How? Handling structured data, like configure. Yeah, I see what I was thinking, but my mind was just, thinking about other stuff. But JavaScript object notation. So yeah, regular expressions was not the one for this one. It's actually JavaScript. I was initially wanting to pick the JSON one, but I saw structured data. I'm like, yeah, regular expressions, but I was wrong. Because it's talking about configurations. It's not talking about parsing data. If it would have been about parsing data, it would have been a regular expression. In threat hunting, what is an example of an active defense technique? Honeypot, indicator of compromise, analysis, business critical assets, or timeliness. What is an example of an active defense? Active defense. I want to say honeypot because honeypot's how you detect and see what the attackers are actually doing, because you have vulnerable looking things that the attackers try to exploit. So honeypot is the most likely one for this because that's the only really one that makes sense. Why are lessons learned documented after an incident? To update your playbooks, to conduct forensic analysis, to improve future responses, to activate BC, business continuity, disaster recovery. Why are lessons learned documented after an incident? To conduct forensic analysis, to improve future responses, to improve future responses. In communication during an incident, which aspect handles customer notifications? Legal, regulatory reporting, public relations, law enforcement. In communications during an incident, which aspect handles customer notification? I would say regulatory reporting. Also public relations. It's in between, but I would probably say public relations. Handle customer notification. What network architecture model combines on-premises and cloud environments? On-premises, hybrid, zero trust, serverless. What network architecture model combines on-premises and cloud environment? So it's not on-premises because it combines something else. It's not zero trust, it's not serverless. So I would say it's hybrid because it's hybrid when two completely different models are working together. Architecture models are working together. Because on-premises is your own equipment. The cloud is using someone else's equipment. And hybrid allows you to see your on-premises resources in the cloud because everything's connected together, right? Of course they'll have access control and stuff like that.